Hey guys, Compulsion84 here with another segment of Compulsion's Corner. I recently got a comment, ironically on the first Compulsion's Corner video, about AR-15s, optics, and just, it sounds like some basics as far as some more advanced stuff. I got this a few hours ago, and it seemed like a perfect thing to make a follow-up video. I've been thinking about what I was going to say for a few hours, and I spent the past 45 minutes or an hour getting all the links ready to do this, so I'm a little bit jazzed up. I might talk a little bit fast. Hopefully this makes sense. So what kicked this video off was a comment from Keenan, and he said, "Great explanation of the 3 AR-15 platforms, thank you very much." And he asked, what was the model of the Vortex scope I have on my AR? He says he just bought his first S&W MMP Sport 2, and he's got a Bushnell TRS 32 dot scope. He mentions he sees shooters use a dot and a regular scope back to back on the same rail. I'm not entirely sure what he means, but I'm definitely going to speculate and try to answer the question. He says, do you do this, and explain what would be the best setup? Well, I really appreciate the comment. I'm gonna kick this off. Hopefully this answers your question, Keenan, and I'm not too long-winded because I got a lot to say. So this is my 3-gun AR. It's built on a Stag, I keep blocking the mic. It's built on a Stag 3G. I've got an aftermarket Magpul buttstock. My scope specifically you asked about I'll get to last, and just a carbon fiber front end because I'm weak and the gun's heavy, so I did that. What I've got on here is a Vortex PST 1-4, or excuse me, a Viper PST 1-4x scope, and this is meant to be used up close and to medium ranges, specifically in action shooting. And the nice thing is you can get pretty close to this. It's meant to be a flexible optic with a big eye box, they call it. It's also mounted on a Vortex mount. This thing runs about $80 to $100, and you'll notice that it's cantilevered, meaning that it's positioned forwards, so you can see how I've got a pretty big distance back here. I'm actually mounting the scope forward, so with a traditional mount I would have to mount over the gap, or over the bridge with the upper receiver and the rail, which you never want to do. So what these cantilevered mounts let you do is move it forward while still properly mounting the scope. There may be a little bit more, but it's really not bad. But if you're going to be doing any sort of AR scope, a cantilevered mount was probably the way to go in a lot of circumstances. And they have different versions. They have, I believe, 2-inch and 3-inch with this version. And they also come in 2 different diameters for tubes, which is 1-inch or 30 millimeters. 30 millimeters is a little bit bigger if you're not familiar with the metric system. A bigger optic will typically let more light in, and I personally prefer it. So that's what I use. I'll tell you why I went with this one, some alternates that I either had or looked at, and what I would recommend looking at in the future. The other thing I'll call out real quick, and I'll splice some photos in later, is this throw lever, which enables you to change the scope's magnification very quickly, like this. Now it's at 4. Now, ooh, I gotta tighten mine. Now it's at 1. Rather than grabbing this hard metal ring and turning it several times slowly, it enables you to quickly throw your optic from one side to the other, again for action shooting and stuff like that. So I'm gonna put my gun down and start tab mania. So I've got notes, as always. I didn't put them in Excel, but they're on a little digital post-it note. Probably going to crop this out, but there's probably 15 to 25 links up here, so I'm going to try to go quickly so I don't bore you. So when you're looking at doing some scope mounting or buying a scope, what you want to do, there's a few things that are kind of important. You've got your reticle spacing or type, which would be MRAD, which is mils, or MOA typically. You can decide on capped or uncapped turrets, and then you can choose reticles. And this is all within the same exact scope. So you can narrow down to a scope and then have a whole bunch of different options, and I'll show you a couple of those right here. What I'm getting at is you can pick a scope and still have 2 to 3 or even 4 different options between reticles and things like that. So here we go. The Burris MTAC I actually owned for about a month. I liked it a whole lot. The glass was very clear for a $300 to $400 scope. It's an illuminated reticle, however, it uses this ballistic CQ reticle shown here, and here's the kind of problem I have with it. I like the idea. It actually worked perfectly at 400 yards. I was able to hit like a maybe 3x3-inch steel plate repeatedly, because the bullet drop compensation worked pretty much perfectly for XM193, which is the ammo that I shoot. However, the large, thick red ring I felt kind of cluttered the reticle and obstructed my vision more than I would have liked. So that being said, if you can see one of these or you know somebody with one, I would definitely look at the MTAC. It's a great $300 1:4 optic. I liked it a lot, and I got a Vortex PST, and sometimes I almost regret switching over, because I think the reticle I've got is a little bit fine etchings, and my eyes are terrible, so it's kind of hard to see the fine etchings when I'm really squinting at 400 yards. But the other thing is, so remember I was talking reticles? So I'm going to say standard MTAC uses the ballistic CQ reticle. The alternate one is this ballistic AR, which I'm really fond of these type of reticles. When I got my MTAC, this reticle didn't exist. So it's the upside down horseshoe, a red dot in the center, or in this instance you've got an illuminated reticle. It's not a true red dot. And then you've got not windage, elevation marks that you can see that they taper down a little bit. So what this is to adjust for long distance shooting. So these can be really cool. The only thing you have to be careful with these ballistic reticles is to make sure that the ammo you're using is properly set up, you know your holdovers and stuff like that. If I shoot XM193 and you shoot 855 62 grain stuff, it's not going to hit in the same spot. So you just got to learn your ammo, learn your gun, learn your scope, and there's tons of programs to calculate this out there. So again, an MTAC's a really good option, one that I've thought almost regretted getting rid of before. Next thing is the throw lever I was talking about, so you can get those for an MTAC. For some reason, throw levers are really expensive. They usually run 50 or 60 bucks. So there's this here. Before I get any further, I forgot to say, I've got tons of Amazon affiliate links in the description below. And it's from my Word document, it's a lot. So I've got several different scopes, several different options, and within each of those, I've got different versions. So for example, I've got 2 different versions of an MTAC, the throw levers, the mounts. There's a lot of stuff. So if you want to know about anything I'm talking about here, look in the description and there'll definitely be a link for you. It's just going to be maybe down there a little bit depending what part of the video I'm talking about. Onward. Alright, so this next one, this I have not personally used, but I found this when I was researching for this video and I'm very intrigued. So this is the Vortex Strike Eagle, which is slightly cheaper than the Vortex PST I got. And for what I read in the reviews, the glass may not be quite as good, but so reticle wise, I'm very interested. So if you look at this, you've got the horseshoe, which I really like. You've got the BDC type dropping elevation that scales out as you go out, and then you've got a very open, clear reticle. They got rid of the traditional cross pattern. I really like the reticle from the look of this. I did a little quick searching on like 3Gun Nation and stuff, and people seem to have favorable things about it. It's got a good Amazon rating, and again, I don't have personal experience with it, but if I was going to be looking at an optic, I would be looking at this if I didn't have one, because it looks like it might be a great option for 300 bucks. Alright, the next thing. This is the scope that I currently have on my gun. It's the Vortex PST. It runs about $450 or $500. So when I was talking about different versions of scopes, reticles, etc., this is what I'm talking about. So this is a MOA scope with capped turrets. And the reason I specifically bought this one, because I go between MOA and mils, I still haven't ultimately decided, is these caps, or these turrets, are, literally capped. And it's exactly what it sounds like. I've got the easy to adjust turrets. See if I can get a click in here. And I don't screw up my zero, which I've done. Oh well, I need to re-zero this gun anyways. The reason I like these is because for 3Gun specifically, you are quite literally throwing your gun in a 55-gallon plastic drum bucket, tossing it in there, sometimes with a lot of gusto, and if you have exposed turrets, you can easily knock them loose. Now some scope options have set screws you can do to tighten them down or mount them, or try to affix it, or they have a system where you can kind of grab it and lift it to adjust it. I think this is more fail-safe. I like to have safety, redundancy, preventative things. So this is the best option when you're not going to be adjusting it much. Because again, when using an AR for action shooting, which is what I do, or what I do with this gun I should say, action shooting is really fun regardless. But anyways, I'm not going to be adjusting these much. I'm going to zero this gun and maybe when I go out to 400 yards, adjust it, and then adjust it right back. And I'm going to learn my holdovers so that I'll adjust my reticle up or down based on what range I'm shooting at. And that's again something you learn for your gun, you know, your scope system, and you practice these holdovers. Because when I'm at like 15 feet, for example, I'm actually aiming high and using the bottom part of this circular PST reticle. Well, this circular PST reticle right here. So I'm actually using the bottom edge up close. Put this back down. So I went with this one because it had a lot of good reviews. The glass was very clear. People seem to like it. For $500, it looks very good. A lot of times you'll need to go to like an $800 or $900 scope to get similar optics quality. It works really well. Like again, I have the same complaint with the MTAC, with the illumination not being super bright. And then my biggest problem with this is the etchings or markings for windage and elevation are just kind of narrow. So if you're, you know, really squinting, or there's not good contrast, or it's a dark day, it can be kind of hard to see. Especially, you know, a couple of these down, when I try to use these at 400 yards, it gets a little tough. So that's my main complaint with this scope. Alright, so remember I was just talking about cap turrets. Here's one with the exposed turrets, and again, this is meant just so you can adjust it on the fly. If you're just shooting from like a bench or, you know, a range gun, this will work great. But if you're doing something more rugged, even hunting, I don't know if I would want this, because personally, I can't say that. I don't hunt, but I would imagine I would learn holdovers just like I would with action shooting, so that I wasn't tinkering with something. Because I can imagine if you had an exposed cap turret in the woods, it could easily get bumped. But again, I'm not a hunter, that's just that's just my observation. So these can be easily adjusted for, you know, shooting on the range, different loads, whatever. Let's see. They have the throw lever, of course. Again, it's like 60 bucks. They're kind of expensive, but if you want to do that, if you've got the money, that's how you quickly adjust your scope. Now, what I'll mention real quick before I move off the Vortex, I guess, train, if you have a lot of money, or I guess this is more of a mid-range, it's over $1,000, so I'm going to say it's expensive. So if you want to get an expensive scope for 3-gun or whatever, but don't want to dive into the $2,000 to $3,000 territory, this HD Gen 2 is a very popular option. A lot of people love this scope. It's got this reticle developed by a professional 3-gunner, which has got, you know, a fairly clean look, a very bright, true red dot. This isn't an illuminated reticle, it's a very bright red dot. That's why people like the scope so much. And then it's got elevation drops set up with ideal subtensions. The one con with this thing is it's heavy as hell. I would say it's about 30 to 50% heavier than a lot of comparable scopes. So while it is built like a tank and works great, it is heavy. So if you have a heavy AR like mine, you might not want to get one of these. However, if you've got more money and you can take the weight, you might want to look into this before you jump into some of the other $2,000 scopes. All right, there's a throw lever for that thing. That's boring. Okay. So getting back to your question, you mentioned having a scope and a red dot on the same rail, kind of back to back, and I've never actually seen that before. I think what you're talking about is either co-witnessing, which I'm showing here, which is where you have a scope and a front sight post or some other optic, and you've got it lined up so it's kind of like this. So when I'm looking down the gun, or when I'm looking down the gun, when you're looking down the scope, you can still see the front sight post, and that way if your scope gets damaged, you can still use your front sight post to aim. That's common in a lot of military applications. Some people like to do it for redundancy. So that might be one thing you're talking about, which is an option. I personally don't like it because I don't want my vision to be obscured, and I think the optics I choose are reliable, and I'm not in a war zone. While I am beating up my guns and action shooting, I'm not destroying these things, so I don't need co-witnessing. If you have to have absolute redundancy, then this might be the thing to do, because you'll always have that iron sight no matter what. But if you're just doing target shooting or whatever, I personally don't think co-witnessing is necessary. Now, another thing you may have been talking about when you mention a red dot and a scope together might be a red dot with a magnifier, or a holographic sight with a magnifier. So shown here, I've got just a regular old EOTech scope, and I think there's a couple dozen of these things with different configurations, batteries, reticles, all sorts of other stuff. So this is just a kind of a plain Jane one that takes AA's. Now, what you may be, and this is what I think what you're getting at, is a magnifier that flips over in front of your EOTech or in front of your aim point red dot. And so this quite literally is mounted. I don't have one of these, so I can't really show you but you would mount the red dot or the EOTech forward, put the magnifier in the back, and then you quite literally flip it over so it's on like a hinge with a heavy resistance. So when you need it, you quite literally flip it in front of you. And this might be belaboring it a little bit, but if you've ever played a lot of video games and things like that, this is a very common thing you can get in something like Call of Duty or like that. You know, you'll see this in a lot of movies and things like that. It's a very drastic, a very kind of dramatic thing. You just like flip the magnifier in front. So this might be what you're talking about. I personally went with a magnified low power optic instead of a magnifier EOTech combo for two reasons. One, you can get a basic entry one for $400 to $500. Two, a lot of people kind of complained about some of these low power magnifiers. Some people love them and swear by them, but there was enough there to make me hesitant to get one. And again, at the time when I bought this, I think I was just out of college, so I didn't have much money. So I couldn't spend $1,000. I could spend $400 or $500. So that's an option. You can do these flip magnifiers. They're usually about 3 power. Here is one shown with the EOTech and the magnifier together. They sell them in combo kits. I'll put 1 or 2 of them in the links below. Let's see. Oh geez, I closed something. Hold on. Another option is with the MTAC. They have one with what's called a fast fire, quick reflex sight or red dot, and you can see shown right on top here, it's quite literally mounted on top of the scope. So you can have your scope down low where you'd use it like this. Then if you want to use, up close, you either move your gun down or move your eye up a little bit, and now you've got like a reflex sight for closer engaged shooting. That's another option. A lot of scope manufacturers do sell either adapters to go on top of the scope mount itself, which would quite literally be like a railed portion right here. Some of them sell what's essentially a really expensive pipe clamp, which goes around the circular portion of their scope, clamps down with two Allens or 2 screws, and then you put your mount on your reflex or your small red dot on that way. Another thing I figured I'd mention when I was talking about all this is an offset mount, which you can quite literally get a 45-degree offset mount. Again, you can do this on top of your scope, kind of on the side of it with one of those band type mounts, or you can do it with one that goes right on the Picatinny rail and gives you a 45-degree mounting surface. And with this, you could put a small red dot on it, or they also sell some that I found with a built-in iron sight. Let's see if they have a better. So you can actually just put it right there and then have some redundancy. This is only going to work up close without really throwing off your zero. Some people like the ability to go ba 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 and then turn their gun sideways. It's totally tactical, so if you want to look really sweet and shoot your gun and turn it sideways and shoot it some more, you could get one of these 45-degree mounts. I don't have a strong preference. It's kind of acceptable. If you like it, you like it. The one thing I'll mention before I go any further, you asked about having a red dot and a scope on my same gun, and I think you said if it was best. Let me flip back real quick. Do you do this, and what would be the best setup? So shooting in a USPSA multi-gun or 3-gun, there's a whole bunch of rule sets for different divisions. With this gun, with a single, there's different groups. So I have a single magnified optic, so that puts me in tactical optics. If I were to put 2 optics on there, a magnified one and an unmagnified one, that would put me in a different division. I believe it would be open. So that would essentially move me to a crazy division where anything goes that I don't want to be in. So one of the reasons why I don't have a red dot and a scope on my gun is because of rule sets for the competitions that I shoot in. The other reason is I don't think it's 100% necessary for what I'm doing. Again, based on your usage, it might make sense, but every person's application, what they intend to shoot, how they intend to shoot, that's how you decide to set up your gun. So if you need to have 2 different options, putting a red dot on top of your scope or a 45-degree offset mount might be perfect for you. But be aware, if you do want to compete, you gotta read the rules first and understand them, so you don't put yourself in open division with the ridiculous race guns and you'll just get destroyed, because the guns they're shooting are absolutely ridiculous. And I couldn't talk about scopes and the low magnification range without mentioning an ACOG. Now, these are really expensive, they're military proven, people love them. I'm not going to say anything bad about an ACOG because they work great. Their glass is crystal clear, the reticles are great, there's, I don't know, half a dozen or a dozen different reticles you can choose from. There's tons of options. The reason I don't own an ACOG and why I'm not a huge fan of them is a couple reasons. One, it's a fixed 4, which I don't like fixed optics. I like to have variable optics. I want to be able to go to 1. If you do a Trijicon ACOG 4X with a red dot combo, that might be the best in the world because you've got a perfectly clear 4X for extended range, and then you've got the red dot for up close. And Trijicon even sells a system to do that. The other thing is they have a fiber optic to absorb light to keep the reticle bright. And third, they've got a built-in tritium insert to keep this light. The one problem with tritium is it does go bad eventually. I believe after 10 years it loses about half its brightness. So eventually it's going to go bad and require replacement, which is very expensive. But if you, especially if you like fixed 4, you want something more ruggedized, more military-esque. These are very, very, very popular, and you really can't go wrong with them if you can afford them and if they fit your needs. Just make sure that fixed 4 will work for you. This is just one option right here. You'll have to go to Trigicon's website to see all the options because there's a lot of them. So take a look. If you're going to buy one, be really careful. Make sure you find exactly the color, reticle, magnification, everything you want, because again, you're plopping down $1,200 or $1,400, which is a lot. Now finally, I'll get back to mounts. I was talking about this a little bit earlier. So the offset mounts are really important for an AR. Water break. All right, I'm hydrated again. So when you're talking lower cost offset AR scope mounts, there's two major options that I've noticed at the sub $100 price point that are very good that, you know, people have very little negative things to say about. One is the Burris Pepper. Burris is the company that makes the MTAC scope. That runs about $60 or $70, and that comes in 30 millimeter or 1-inch scope diameter varieties. And then the other one, which is the one I went with, was the Vortex, oh crap, Vortex cantilever ring mount. Okay, so their name's not a good acronym. So the Vortex scope mount with no fun name comes in 30 millimeter or 1-inch diameters, as well as the 2-inch offset or the 3-inch offset. I did just have to confirm that because I didn't want to tell you the wrong thing. I was 90% sure, but the internet never forgets, and I don't want to mislead people. So anyways, 2-inch or 3-inch offset, depending how much offset you want. You'll just have to look at your scope, get an idea. Most people get the 2-inch offset. I think I got 3, figuring I could always move it back a little bit if I needed to, but either one will work. Again, the Vortex one is about 70 or 80 bucks, and then the Pepper one is about 60 or 70, or excuse me, the Vortex one is about 80 or 90. So those are both good options on what you can do. Let me just check my list. I want to make sure I didn't forget anything talking about this. Low mag scopes, Alright, let me jump back to your question, make sure I didn't forget anything. 2-dot and a rectangular scope, back to back on a rail. Do you do this? Okay, so I think I answered all your question, Keenan. Thanks for asking. Hopefully that helped you out. Hopefully this helps out anybody else who happened to find this video from either my channel or suggested videos or whatever. If you haven't seen me before, I'm Compulsion84. I do gun, gaming, and gadget-related videos. This segment I've called Compulsion's Corner, which is just kind of a video response, question and answer type of thing. So I'm not going to be doing this just on guns, but whenever I get kind of an expanded comment, I'm going to be diving into it in more detail because I've been known to give multi-paragraph responses in the text comments. And this is a YouTube channel. The medium's video, people also aren't going to dig through every comment. So if there's something that I think is very valuable to the greater community, I will make a video response to it. So this is kind of a working segment. Let me know your thoughts, if you liked it, if you didn't. It once again went longer than I intended to. The whole point of these is to be more fluid, more responsive. I'm going to try to post these not on a schedule, but right after the people commented. So it'll be a little bit less edited. I'm going to throw in a couple pictures at a couple points just to try to emphasize things, but I'm not going to be trying to put the finesse I am to a normal video. This is supposed to be a more personal, direct, more straightforward thing. So if you have any other questions or anything, elaborations, thoughts on anything, any future video suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And again, I do appreciate constructive feedback on this. This is kind of a new segment I'm still you never stop learning. I'm still learning what to do on YouTube, still fleshing some things out. I like doing these video responses, I like interacting with the fans, so I hope this was valuable to you. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel, and thanks for watching.